But Democratic South Africa, the State of the Nation address has been postponed. Parliament is trying to ensure that the budget, set to be delivered on the 21st of February by Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba, will go ahead without changes to that date. For more on this, I'm joined by Daniel Silke, who is the Director of Political Futures, live from our Cape Town studios. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. What are the economic and reputational implications of a delayed State of the Nation address?
Well, I think for most South Africans, they will be prepared to put up with some level of delay because this impasse over leadership and in particular the transition towards a Ramaphosa administration really is of paramount importance for the country. Whilst I think it's been exceptionally badly handled and frankly should have been sorted out many weeks ago, the fact that I think we are moving to a resolution over the next few days, certainly from a business point of view, is not going to have a dramatic effect. I think we've seen the rand at relatively stable levels despite larger market volatility. I think we've seen Ramaphosa at Davos express himself quite clearly on a way forward for South Africa, for a renewal for the country's economy, and for the ANC as well, for that matter. And I think business has largely bought into that, and they will be prepared, I think, to use a colloquial phrase, cut Ramaphosa some slack for the next X amount of days until the position is finalized. But if it drags on into next week, if it becomes increasingly fraught with a tit-for-tat heavyweight boxing game, which it seems to be, then I think at that point it can undermine confidence and credibility in Ramaphosa as the potential incoming president.
We've heard Parliament trying to reassure South Africans that the budget will take place on the 21st of February. Seeing that we don't have a definite date as yet for SONA, how feasible is this and what are the implications when it comes to this delay in finding out when SONA will be on the budget?
Well, I think it's true to say that SONA and the budget are the two most important showpiece events that set the agenda for the year. And normally they should complement each other, at least in some way. So it is important that whoever delivers SONA, and one would expect that it won't be President Zuma who will be delivering SONA, it is important that that SONA speech, if it occurs next week, does contain elements that can be followed up in terms of some of the budget proposals that we'll see. I think that if SONA can be held Wednesday, Thursday of next week, there probably is sufficient time to tweak the budget speech for the following week and to go ahead as scheduled. And my own view is that despite this prevarication that we are all languishing under, the limbo of leadership as one would call it, despite that, I think the ANC will be looking, certainly within the next few days, to rapidly return to the agenda of a SONA, yes delayed, but the budget largely on the same day.
Speaker Baleka Mbete gave an interview yesterday saying that the finance minister will deliver the budget speech and then added at the end, "Don't ask me who." Is it possible that we could see some reshuffles besides the presidency, which is widely expected to see some changes taking place? And what effect would this have?
Now, look, my own view is that we've really left it too late to have any kind of dramatic cabinet reshuffle, especially one that involves the Minister of Finance. I think it is quite sufficient from a political point of view that if indeed we do have the swearing in of Cyril Ramaphosa as president, the political impetus of that would be enough to allow Malusi Gigaba to present his budget, no matter what the question marks might be about Minister Gigaba. I think that continuity, at least for this budget, is very important. I think that Minister Gigaba has presented himself on the global scene, and I think that the leadership change at the top will be enough to allow some continuity in cabinet, at least over the next few weeks, until there is a more major reshuffle.
What economic policy do you believe that South Africa should be implementing if we want to continue our upward of slow growth, lower prices for petrol, and a general easing of strain on the consumer?
Well, look, I certainly think we've got to do the basics right first. And I think we have to assure South Africans that corruption and graft is no longer part of our lexicon. Of course, that's not just a political statement. It's a statement that has affected our state-owned enterprises and has caused us almost ruination in terms of overspend and misallocation of funds. So I think that from an economic point of view, the linkage into the reassurances politically are very important. But over time, I think we're going to have to find a mechanism to restore confidence and sentiment, and that can come without immediate policy initiatives. That policy can come at a slightly later stage and will be more difficult, but at least I think a semblance of sentiment shift that Ramaphosa did provide at Davos, for that matter, and did provide in interviews with global media, that should be, I think, continued into the budget speech. But I'm afraid to say the immediate issue will be, how do we resolve the budget shortfall? And does that come from direct taxes or indirect taxes? And without policy, because we can't suddenly come with policy in the next week or two, it is going to be an issue of managing taxes in order to stave off the budget shortfall. But the sentiment shifts can indeed also stave off any further ratings downgrade and the cost to borrowing that would necessitate if we were downgraded fully to junk, and we're still not quite there yet.
Very briefly, we've seen some analysts saying that there could be an increase in VAT as it hasn't been increased since the early 90s. Do you think that Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba will try and do that to make up for this budget shortfall?
Look, on paper, an increase in VAT is the easiest way to deal with the matter in the shortest amount of time. And I think from a global point of view, from an investor point of view, there would be buy-in to a 1% or even more increase in VAT. Remember, last year we didn't have a VAT increase, but we had personal income taxes go up. It's not possible, I would argue, to continue to raise that threshold of personal income taxes. South Africans are very highly taxed on an individual basis, and we haven't touched VAT for some time. It's also not an election year this year. It gives indeed the ANC and the government a chance to regroup more positively and sell this VAT increase to the electorate, and that's why I think it might be the best of a bad series of choices, I might add. What you really need is policy to change rather than taxation to be the answer to all your ills. But this is a short-term urgent issue that will have to be resolved, probably through indirect taxes.
Daniel Silke from Political Futures, thanks so much for your time on SABC News.